Let's begin now.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Golf Bag podcast. This is Drew hosting this evening with Axis of the fantasygolfbag.com team, and we will be previewing the Sony Open in Hawaii, played at Waialae Country Club, the second event of the 2020 calendar year. I'll go ahead and bring in Axis if you guys haven't heard already, and I'll let him kind of bring you up to speed a little bit too. We do a new kind of review podcast, review and Q&A. We recorded that last night, and it's available on iTunes. So if you're Monday heading into work or Monday, slow day at work, and you want some golf content, you can find our podcast now on Sunday night, Monday morning. And for your listening pleasure, always send us questions if you have it. But Axis, that was one of your ideas, and it came from a couple polls I think we had on Twitter. And I liked it, man. I know it eliminates the review for this, hopefully cuts it down a bit. But it's cool talking a little bit more golf generalization stuff, not just DFS.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that each week, and I think it just gives us another outlet to talk more game theory and more just golf and takes in general, and keep this pretty fantasy / some betting focused.
Yep. So with that, I think our number one priority, at least for the near term, is to keep this thing short and sweet and to the point. So we will try to hit it with a bang this week. Obviously, reviewing it on the podcast yesterday. Let's go ahead and jump in if you're good.
Oh yeah, I'm ready to go. First cut event of 2020. I missed the large field. Last week was nice. It was a successful week, but it's nice to get into a full field tournament, especially with a bunch of, quirky events, in my opinion, with the 3-course type coming up. So
yeah,
nice to have a 54-hole cut.
Yeah, and on a course
36 holes. Sorry, math not my strong suit apparently.
Not ideal. And on a course that's been around for a while, that guys have been playing for 40 years or 50 years or something like that. Obviously, these players haven't, but plenty of course history and plenty of stats for the players that are playing this week. So I'll go to kind of bring everyone up to speed, and I'll let you fill in the gaps because I know you've been one of your projects over the winter bringing into this season is looking at more course comps, more kind of minute course data to see if we can find some diamonds in the rough for analyzing some players, looking a little bit deeper than just strokes gained off the tee approach over 24, 50 rounds, whatever you want to look at. But yeah, so this is the Sony Open in Hawaii. It's going to be played at Waialae Country Club on the island of Honolulu. It's a Seth Rayner design, par 70, 7,044 yards. So kind of right in line. Like it's a par 70. It's a little bit shorter, but it's, a par 72, 7,200 yards. This is right in line, 7,000 par 70. We're back on Bermuda grass for the greens and the fairways. And a couple quick stats. And again, you can find all of this data. It'll be free for all the podcast listeners and Fantasy Golf Bag members. You can go to fantasygolfbag.com/podcast every week, and we'll be updating with our kind of podcast notes. If we have time, we'll try to drop some player tips. But generally, it'll just have the course stuff and any other notes that we want to drop for you. But this is a scoring average of 68.9, so about a stroke, a little more than a stroke under par. Driving accuracy, so I think this is what we'll primarily be talking about and focusing on. Driving accuracy pretty low, 56%. Driving distance for all drives, 290 yards. So kind of the longer side, lower accuracy. You get an idea of how guys are kind of approaching it this week. Green regulation is high, 69%. And then the last 2 points, the average proximity, 34 feet from an average approach distance of 164 yards. So even at a 7,000-yard golf course, they're not having a bunch of wedges in. Average approach 160-ish. It's going to be kind of a staple again for this week. There's no real advantage for anybody, but you will see some course history guys that have really shown up here over the years. So I'll open it up to Axis and see if he has any thoughts, but I mean, it's pretty straightforward to me. I think the driving distance is most intriguing just because you can picture how these guys approach the course. But what you got?
Yeah, so just really quick on the course. When you break it into just approach buckets, there are 13 shots on average that are going to come from 150 to 200 yards. So I'll be looking at more mid to long iron golfers compared to last week was a lot of short irons. And again, just mix this into your process. It's not necessarily, make a list of the top 10 guys from 150 to 200 yards and play them all necessarily. But obviously, if you like the form of those guys, things of that nature, and a guy like Colin Morikawa, who's actually atop the list from that range for me. And you already like Colin this week, so it's just another little cherry on top type thing. So you're going to get 13 shots from there, and then another 4 from 125 to 150-ish. So most of the shots 125 to 200, which is relatively standard, I guess, for most weeks. Compares almost identically to TPC Southwind, which also has hard fairways to hit, although a little more out of bounds at TPC Southwind if you go too far astray from those fairways. And I also looked at, so if you filter by the rough, like missing the fairway at Waialae does cost you about tour average 0.35 strokes, but the scoring relative to par is still about 0.08 strokes. So you can still score pretty well from the rough here. It's not overly penal. Even the fairway bunkers weren't terrible when I looked. The thing to avoid here would be the greenside bunkers seem to really add up quickly to your score over par. So unfortunately, that's not something I can really predict. It was just something I found interesting while trying to break down the course itself. And I know you mentioned they've been playing here for a while, course history. The best guy I have weighted, and I just went back to 2013, I believe. So I have 16 rounds for Matt Kuchar. Kuchar and JT are easily the top 2 of anybody who have played at least 8 rounds, followed by Kazire, Webb Simpson, and Jimmy Walker. So that's the type I'm kind of looking at for the course this week. Distance did show that the guys who hit it a little further do score a little better, but I think that's pretty standard on most courses. But considering how short this is and the long irons in, it does take the driver out of the hand a hair. But always better to be long in general, though, I guess. So.
Yeah, for par 70 versus last week was par 73. The winning score is going to be about the same under par. Last year, Kuchar won at 22 under, Kazire at 17 under in 2018. Justin Thomas went super low. He won by 7 strokes in 2017, shot 27 under. And then the next 2 years, 20 under and 23 under. So, right around 5 under a day is going to get the job done or be pretty close to the lead. So you can look at, I think the average birdie average on tour is like 3.5 or something like that. So a little bit of an emphasis on birdie or better this week for sure. Looking at guys, especially with the green and regulation so high. This should be a course where guys can be a little bit more volatile and have plenty of birdie opportunities. Not a ton of par 5. So obviously par 5 scoring this week will be important because there's only 2. So for the tournament, it's important. But like when you're looking at the overall, it's really only going to take up 8 holes in the 72 holes for the entire event. So not very important in the grand scheme of things. But that, like, talking through the guys that have won here, there's been a mixed bag. You look at Justin Thomas, Jimmy Walker, and then the last couple of years with Kazire and Kuchar, Fabian Gomez in there. There's a mix of guys, so you can do it both ways. I do think birdies is going to be pretty key this week, and we didn't really talk about it we didn't really talk about it last week leading into this week, but I would assume the people that have played at Kapalua, I wouldn't say have an advantage, but definitely a little bit of a nod having played in Hawaii. They've been out there for probably 2.5 weeks now. I would imagine you're giving
since the President's Cup.
Has he?
Yeah, he said he came, right from Australia up to Hawaii, living the dream.
Yeah, I think he did that last year, if I'm not mistaken. He won. I think he won and then stayed like 2 weeks later as a vacation after he had won there, something like that. So,
yeah, I have just one thing I wanted to mention also. The forecast for this week also looks like the winds are going to continue from what it looked like. I don't know if it will have as adverse of an effect on the play as it does at Kapalua. I just did want to mention that currently it looks to be about 20 mile an hour each and every day. So just keep keep an eye on that, especially now we will have actual tee time waves. So you could find a potential edge.
Yeah, I was surprised the guys handled it so well last week, but it does seem like they're going to get some nasty weather again this week. So normally we run through pricing 10K down to the 6K. Sounds like there's been mixed reviews. Like some people want to just touch on the top plays, maybe, touch on strategy or fades. So we don't really have an agenda on just talking strategy or anything like that. Usually we bring that up during the Slackjack conversations in the live stream on Wednesday night, which will be resuming this week. So I don't know, Axis, if you want to just kind of group the 9K and 10K in a bucket and kind of hit on some of your top guys you're looking at, maybe some reasons why, and that might be the best course of action for this week, and we'll see what the feedback is.
Yeah, so for me, I always break it down by my overall model first, and then I kind of look at the strokes gained statistics individually after that. So obviously at the top, Justin Thomas, 12K. Webb Simpson then down almost $1,000 at 11-1. Reed, Hideki, and Morikawa. I really liked Colin before the pricing came out. 10-3 feels like it could be a stretch for me. I guess in GPPs, I definitely would have him in my lineup pool. For single entry is where it gets a little dicey, really, for me to be spending up for anyone in this range. Red Hot Patrick Reed is up here. However, his short game is very good. So it's not to say that it's all smoke and mirrors. Like, he does have a consistently good short game, but that was pretty well all he had last week. But if it's super windy, that could come in handy again. JT at 12K. I mean, if you're playing JT at 12K, you are penciling in that you think he's going to win, or at least T2. Like, you need those finishing bonus points, because plenty of guys are going to be making birdies here. Not that he's incapable, but I think in the 10K range, Morikawa would probably be my favorite. And then into the 9K range, I'd like to go back to Neiman at 9.4. Sungjae Im is making an appearance for the first time in 2020. Quite the time off for Sungjae. So he should. I'm sure he's ready to go. He's probably been itching and scratching like an addict. But 9.6K, I think he's very much in play. Actually might be he might be the most, I think he should have been closer to 10K in my pricing, closer to Colin anyway. So I think he's probably a better value than
Sungjae
Morikawa. Yeah,
I agree.
I mean, I love Morikawa, don't get me wrong, but it's probably because he played last week and played well. He's getting a little boost from the odds makers, give him a little boost on DK. As far as that goes, that's really what I'm looking at in this range would be Im, Neiman, Morikawa perhaps, and then GPPs, you can expand that a little bit maybe to a few other guys in this range.
Yeah, so it's kind of in this top tier range. I actually do like Morikawa quite a bit at 10.3. This was kind of a reoccurring theme from last year, but like as the fall swing takes place, so if you're new to PGA Tour DFS, the PGA Tour has a wraparound season. So like when the fall swing kicks off in September, I think, you have data from guys playing the summer through August. Like you can actually use that. Now that you've gotten a big break since basically November, it's tougher to gauge where their game's at. So I use a lot more recent form, a lot of last week's stats. People hate the recent, I wouldn't call it recency bias, but people hate the smaller sample from last week. But I will say, Colin Morikawa gained 6 strokes tee to green last week, 3.5 off the tee, 3.0 right on the dot on approach, like super solid. Contrary to that, Patrick Reed lost 1.5 strokes on approach. He didn't gain any strokes off the tee, and he gained 9 strokes putting. So I have a tough time paying up for JT. I know the course records there, or the course history is there with a win, coming off of a win. But starting my lineups with Morikawa is probably the way that I would lean. Then you already mentioned it. Sungjae Im 9,600 I do think is a value. I think he is probably like ranking the field. I think he's probably priced in the right spot as far as like ranking of the pricing. But I do think 9,600 is a value considering where Hideki and Colin Morikawa are priced. And then Neiman, kind of in the same boat as Morikawa off of last week. Demon gained 6 strokes to the field, and he gained most of those tee to green. So 1 stroke approach, 1.5 strokes off the tee. So really balanced. He did gain some strokes putting, which I would take as an encouragement considering the Bermuda greens, transitioning that here. I think this is a good golf course for him. Like, I think we've seen guys, and we didn't really touch on this, so I don't want to be stepping on anyone's toes, but there was some talk last week, I guess, about left-handers not playing Kapalua very well. And I don't think faders particularly play great. Faders with their irons play great here. And I like the idea of Joaquin Niemann navigating these fairways because there are a lot of dogleg lefts. And that'll probably be it. I've seen people talk about Charles Howe. He's had a pretty consistent record here. But it's tough for me to pay for that with ownership and limited upside, in my opinion. So those are really the main pieces that I'm focusing on in this kind of top tier. Anything there that stands out, or?
Actually,
Abraham Answer, I guess, would be the last one. I was throwing him down in the 8K range, but like his course history is bad, and he's one of those GPP guys that he's been super impressive, and I think I've missed out more times than I felt like I got ahead. Not playing Abraham Answer. So he'll probably be on my list, even though he's 9K is expensive. I like his upside, man. He seems like he's pretty gritty.
So my question, I guess, would be with Answer, can you look past the crappy course history and perhaps, last year's his best golf as a season. So perhaps that was part of the poor course history. He was just finding his game when he was younger. Not that I don't include course history as a giant factor to begin with. I haven't found it to be very significant one way or another. Normally there's a handful of guys each week who seem to statistically just play better at certain courses. But I'm wondering if Answer maybe is just from finally growing into his game a little bit as well. Because I do like Answer. Yeah. So
there's something think 2 years now since his first time he played here. PGA Tour experience, obviously playing against Tiger and losing, like those little things people don't really realize. It builds a lot for a player, like just the confidence. You look at Brooks. Brooks came from the European Tour, not to get on a tangent really fast, but like Brooks wasn't good enough to play on the PGA Tour right out of school. He was pretty good. He probably could have tried the Korn Ferry Tour. Goes to the European Tour, comes over here, wins a major, and all of a sudden now he's winning majors 50% clip right now. There's a lot to be said for just like players' experiences and how that builds their confidence. So it's, again, you're right on the course history. It's not great. Even his form leading in every single event seems hit or miss for the last like 5 or 10 events. But I do think he's got more upside in these type of fields playing him than just like, oh yeah, he has bad course history, I'll skip out.
Yeah, I think it goes back to I think Jordan Spieth ruined a lot of people's perception of young golfers when he just stormed onto the scene and he's suddenly getting second place at the Masters, and then he's winning the Masters, and he's getting second place again, and he's winning U.S. Opens and British Opens, and I think people forget that that's not typical of young golfers. And even JT started winning a lot. Once he started winning a lot, and he's still young. So I think sometimes people have to realize, outside of some of these handful, like Rahm, superstars, that it takes time.
JT.
Typically, like Neiman, he came on pretty hot fire though when he first got his conditional status. A lot of top 10s, miscut top 10. And then he had kind of a down year. And then last year, halfway through, maybe really started to find his game again and finally won at Greenbrier. And look where he's at now. So I think Answer could very much be in that same boat.
Yeah, actually, if I'm not mistaken, JT had to play the Korn Ferry Tour for like 2 or 3 events. He got his card really fast, but like there's very few that pull the Spieth card and get an exemption, finish top 3, and then or even Morikawa, Wolf, all these guys. Like, honestly, we're kind of overlooking some of them.
It's a handful of guys who are able to do it, and I think other people then look at some of these other younger guys and are like, well, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
But they're going the more typical path. So if we jump into the 8K range, so 5 of these guys played last week, and you'll hear a bunch of how the last 7 out of 8 winners or whatever played the week before in Kapalua. I'm sure there might be something to that. I can't statistically say. Maybe it's just they knocked the rust off. They played in the wind. They're in Hawaii. I don't know. It could be any of those. It could be completely random. But you have those guys like a Connors, Kisner, Reeve, Todd, and Poston in this area. The one that stuck out, I guess I could play Connors again. I played him last week, but he's a lot more expensive this week. You know what you get with him, though. You just cross your fingers and hope the putting isn't -4 and maybe only -3 strokes gain. But I don't know. Snedeker stuck out to me in my projections this week at 8,600 in this range. So I'd probably get on Snedeker and hop back on JT Poston as well in this range. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, probably not Poston. Just, again, going off the recent form last week I think he lost like 6 strokes tee to green or something like that. But it's tough to say like how their actual form was on a drastically different golf course than what Kapalua was. But to take a little bit of that, I agree with Connors. I mean, Connors, I think on this course, this was kind of where he almost had his breakout moment last year, and then led into a pretty big career or pretty big year. I think Corey Connors is a perfectly fine start down here. Kisner, I've heard some chatter about, but I do think you're right on Snedeker. Snedeker's the one that always gets overlooked. He gets the kind of false narrative, I guess, around wind. But when you talk about world-class players, and he definitely has his share of terrible tournaments, but he's actually one of the more consistent guys. I mean, he's not on a Webb Simpson.
Very much.
Yeah. So I'm perfectly fine going to him. I have found over the course of my PGA. He has
upside too, with his putting, he has the upside to roll them in and just rack them up.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I have found that he's one of the players, and there's probably a handful I can probably name that he's not going to pop for anybody in any particular stat model, in any stats. And Reed's kind of in the same boat, but yeah, I'm good with Snedeker there. Reeve, I'll probably go back to, which is pretty cringeworthy. But like I said, I'm not sure about JT Poston, and then Brendan Todd, I guess, would be the last one that I'm worth rostering, or I'm considering rostering. But last week was awful, and I'm just hoping it was more of a course thing than his game, because like from winning 2 out of 3 events or something like that a month and a half ago, he lost 5 strokes tee to green or something. I'm just hoping it was something a little bit different.
Well, I'm on the team of that being a giant mirage to begin with, but
I was, but three times is tough.
That being said, yeah, I don't know. I think last week really isn't that big of a bomber's paradise to begin with. So I think the course was okay for him. It was very deep. It's probably the deepest field he's played in since his resurgence. So that's true. That had something to do with it. And then really quick on Ches. So in the approach buckets I talked about, 150 to 200, he ranked second in this field when I filtered for having at least, I believe it was 100-ish shots from last season. So still not a ton, but he finished second behind Morikawa in that. So if that means anything to anybody, he'll be having a lot of shots, approaches from an area he's seemed very comfortable in last season. So
perfect. Yeah, he's a West Coast.
On Ches, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, he's West Coast early season type of player. Always. I guess outside of that, there's really nobody until I get down into the upper 7K range. There's really only a few that I'm trying to make a decision on. I think Russell Knox is totally fine. He's very consistent. Sebastian Munoz had a dip, and he was kind of in that same boat we talked about where last week I think he was super popular, so his ownership probably drops a ton, but he he lost, 5 strokes on approach, which is very difficult to do. So 5 strokes on approach, it's tough to like bounce back from that mentally for a player for like me to play him. But you have thoughts on him? Because Brian Stewart's got serious course history. I'm thinking people look to that with no recent form, and they see Munoz and think, wow, he's dipping.
Munoz was a very big anchor that I had to drag along in my lineup. Last week, we made it, but it was, -5. Impressive.
Really tough.
But Actually, so in this range, so a guy popped in my projections that he probably could have paid me a lot of money to guess, and it wouldn't have been him in the 7K range. But Carlos Ortiz popped for me in my DK point projections, as well as everybody else's favorite ball striker to play, Emiliano Grillo. Now, his projection wasn't as good, but he ranks third in the key approach distance for me. So I still had to highlight him as a potential down here at 7,600. Then another guy that I played all fall and who also is pretty solid in that same range would be Vaughn Taylor. I think Vaughn Taylor is actually probably, let me make sure. One of the top value guys to me in this field. So it's kind of where I'm looking at in this mid to upper 7K range.
Carlos Ortiz is so tough. That was kind of the reason why.
Oh yeah,
it's difficult to put a peg into why. Someone that's coming in with good form, and maybe he gets overlooked because he hasn't played in a while. He's not a name brand by any means, but he finished during the fall swing, finished 4th, 40th, 37th, 4th, and 2nd his last two events there. Super good ball striking, gained over 5 strokes tee to green in 4 of those 5. It's really tough to overlook him. You just don't know where his game's at. So those are one of the ones, and I'll put a disclaimer out there. These are the guys where you're going to go roster some guys this week, and you just don't know where their game's at, and you just got to kind of take the lumps with the diamonds, because there's going to be guys that show up and play really good. They weren't even on your radar, and some guys that it's like you just got to grasp at something. And I mean, he's playing good coming in here, but granted, that was 2 months ago, almost.
Yeah. And I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Lanto Griffin. He has my highest consistency rating in this range. So if you're looking to maybe build, and he has decent upside in this range as well compared to everybody else. But if you're looking for maybe cash or single entry in this range, Vaughn Taylor, and even I definitely should have mentioned Lanto as well.
Okay, I'll raise you a couple on the low side, because it's fun when you get back into a full field. Because it makes it Daniel Berger season again. So yeah, Daniel Berger coming in. He's made the cut here 4 years in a row. Didn't play last year. He was hurt. But he started to play decent during the fall swing. Finished 23rd at the Safeway, 18th at the Shriners. He went over to the Zozo and finished 17th. So, I mean, there's some more good form there than bad for sure. And he's a pretty good ball striker. I like him on this type of golf course. He's a Florida guy, Bermuda greens. I think there's some good narratives there if you want to grasp at those. I guess people will touch on the Shugo Imahara if they're looking at world ranking stuff. International
Shugo
guy, Imahara.
I have to, we have to talk about Shugo, because I think Sky has texted me his name like 10 times already today. So enjoy the 35th place. That's all I have to say.
That's a made cut.
No, it is. I joke. He has been on fire on the Japanese tour. If you go look at his record on the Japanese tour, it's insane. Then you look at his finishes in PGA events that he's played, they're lacking. However, if you want to take a shot there, he's a good golfer. That's for sure. Not saying that. Just there's a lot to be desired on his PGA finishes. But he does have 2 made cuts here, I think.
That's what I was going to say. We'll have to check our ownership projections, because with most people now, they're sharp enough to look at stats. But when you get stuck looking at stats, you don't start looking outside the box a bit. And 2 made cuts is pretty good for his price. And his form coming in with, doing well in the Japanese tour, which isn't saying a ton. Those are positives, especially if he's all around.
At least on the Japanese tour, though, he's winning. He's getting second. He's getting T5. Like, he is beating those fields.
Huge,
like, he should at least. It's just, keep in mind, drastically different. Like I said, just look at his PGA results. Also, deep fields, plays a lot of the WGC's majors, but there's a little, I don't know. He can definitely make a cut here. That is not out of the question at all. In fact, I'd be surprised if he didn't make the cut. But I don't really look at him as that big of an upside play, but could be very wrong. I'm wrong a lot, so.
I got two upside plays for you down here at the bottom. One is Russell Henley. He's actually won this event way back when. Very sporadic. It's again, he's not a cash play. I think that was one of the comments in our polls, was more GPP versus cash talk. And Henley's one of those, when you talk about upside, he can miss the cut for you, and you're just going to take it and move forward. But he could also finish in the top 5, and he's nearly 7K on the dot, which saves you quite a bit of salary for a guy that can win. You look around in this range and just below here, there's really not a ton of guys you can point to and say they really, have a realistic chance to contend or at least pay off their price, 2 or 3x. So I like him quite a bit for GPPs. And the other one's Kyle Stanley, who I think is closer to a cash play, even when he fails and he's 3-putting, seems like 2 or 3 times around. But Kyle Stanley has like decent, we'll say, cash course history here. His last 4 years here, 13th place, 36th, 10th, and 22nd. We know his ball striking is really good. We know his putting sucks. I'm fine pulling the trigger on Kyle Stanley this week. Just look into his ball striking, and it's not too long. So I think there's 2 sides to this story for him. I think the putting will probably get him, but I do think for his price, there's enough safety and some upside there.
Yeah, for me down here, I only highlighted 3 guys to talk about. There's obviously more you can play from in this range. However, Scott Piercy got highlighted simply due to ball striking prowess and especially from that key range. And then Taylor Gooch for the same reason at 6,800. And then someone who stuck out, and last week he beat the field in 3 of his 4 rounds last week, was Graham McDowell. And if the wind is going to be 20 plus miles an hour again, I see no reason to go away from GMAC already having 4 rounds in, get a little warmed up, get that feel back. And now he's back over here at 6,800 in a larger field, but a way less top heavy field. So at 6,800, I think GMAC, again, I don't think I'd be dipping the toes in cash necessarily, although he'd probably be maybe the one I would do down here. But I definitely think GPPs, he's definitely in play with the current weather forecast as well.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and give out a couple of the low values. And again, like kind of brought up on the show last year at the end of it, obviously talking through a lot of these guys, like you kind of alluded to. Plenty of guys to play in GPPs. There's only a handful that really justify being mentioned. So not going to touch on a ton of guys, but looking at last week's EAP data. So like if you're not familiar, our extended approach numbers are posted on the website already, thanks to Sky. And there's 2 guys that stood out. One guy really interesting to me. He is 6,200, played last week. Jim Herman. I actually had him written up last week just because of his price, limited field. I think even Noto mentioned he was like one of his favorite top 10 bets because he was like 18-1 to finish in the top 10, which is pretty good value. But he's actually played here a number of times, plenty of missed cuts. He showed a 10th place back in 2017, and he made the cut here last year. So I don't know about his upside, but I do think at his price at 6,200, he's got decent cut equity. And looking at his EAP data, I think it was, 28% of his birdie opportunities inside of 18 feet last week, and 7% of his birdie chances inside of 6 feet, which is more than Justin Thomas and Colin Morikawa. I think there's some upside there. And the same thing with Nate Lashley, but I just don't trust Lashley. His EAP looked good, but I'm not going to fall for it. Jim Herman's probably my favorite value. That's super, super cheap.
I will be the opposite of you on Jim Herman. I'll take that as the outlier, and I hope. Although he won't really be owned that much this week, so it won't matter either way how he does to me, I think, especially in single entry type stuff. But another guy I guess I should mention too, and if you look at the extended approach data that you were just referencing, would be Zhenjun Zhang. Probably just massacred that. Mayo says it way, way better than I do. But 56% of his approach shots are positive. So really good with the irons, which, like I said, this course does take the driver out a wee bit. He's not exactly a pin seeker when you look at the percentages inside 6, 12, and 18 feet. However, he's been a guy who hasn't really made a ton of huge errors with the irons. Like, he's at least giving himself a chance to be competitive and make cuts, and that's over 322 shots for him. So I think at 6,700, he is a guy that you could take a risk on and You have to be careful a little bit with the EAP data too, because right below him is our boy Charlie Hoffman, who just, I don't know. We don't need to say much about him, but he's right below him. So, there's always do a little more digging, more than just one pure stat is all I wanted to say for that, because it does make me chuckle that. See, Big Chuck, he gains, he basically, he either hits it within 12 feet of the pin or he misses the green and he's buried. So, and normally he's more often buried.
Yeah, I mean, the points of the EAP for a guy like Jim Herman is it stands out that, hey, last week, he finished 27th, which isn't great in a limited field, but like he had plenty of birdie opportunities. So coming to a tournament the week after, maybe he carries over a bit. He's 6,200 now. He finishes 27th with that, and he was 7,400 pass. But those are the ones. That's kind of where Adam Long popped up, and he's not nearly as long as Adam Long. I don't see him really going crazy on any golf tournament, but it definitely stands out to me for 6,200 because that's huge savings. And I wouldn't say it's in cash for sure, but like even single entry, you throw him in there and he makes the cut. You just saved a ton of salary off of most people that are probably stopping at 7K, maybe 6,900. And now you probably paid up for JT in a single entry that most people didn't. Doesn't mean you played JT in all your GPPs, but it just gives you a different build than most people by going a little bit off the board with some data to back it up.
For sure. You want to know the craziest thing? When I sorted on this extended approach data, I like to look at inside 12 feet since that's, a more realistic putt chance, if you will. So Vaughn Taylor on his this is over 1,500 shots, has the second highest amount of shots inside of 12 feet to the pin. And I know that's maybe not on the hardest courses, but that's I never in a million years would have guessed Vaughn Taylor was behind only Justin Thomas for the amount of shots he's putting inside of 12 feet to a pin. That seemed pretty nuts to me, considering it's over 1,500 shots.
Yeah, and not to harp on this too much, but the people talk, like you brought up Justin Thomas and why he's so good. They talk about him, he comes off the ground when he hits his driver and he hits it a long way, but this data is where it's at for him. Like his birdie chances, the EAP data and like his strokes gain approach, that's the bread and butter for him. Hitting it further helps him for sure, but I think that people get misled thinking, oh, it's going to be a bomber's course for him and he's going to do well. No, he does well on any course because of his approach game. It's unreal.
He leads, so he's first place in this particular field, the Sony. He gains 2.9 strokes a round. That's JT with his irons. Now he loses 1.9, but he gains 0.2 more than Mark Leishman, who's in second. And to get down for Mark to beat somebody by 0.2, you'd have to go 25 golfers down. That's how much JT separates himself with his irons. It's nuts, actually.
Yeah, it is. Morikawa's not too far behind, so
better hope he wins at 12,000. But
well, that's what I'm saying. It's just a different build. If people don't have the salary or they feel uncomfortable, people start dropping the most expensive guys. So try to get a little bit off the wall if you want to play JT. Use the EAP data to help you out on those value plays. And as the year progresses, you'll obviously have 130, 140 guys that probably play the next week. So a bit more to choose from. But 30-man field last week, the EAP data is up. And we also have all the seasonal data from 2019. So I think that'll pretty much do it, Axis. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm good to go. Just keep your eyes out for the upcoming content and articles coming from Fantasy Golf Bag. And hopefully we can get some more winning lineups in your hands this week like last week.
Yep. We'll be back for the live stream Wednesday. Jacob will be back. So you can find that twitch.tv/redkachik. And I haven't nailed down a time yet. I got to work that with Jacob. But keep an eye out for that. You can watch us on Twitter, or you can watch the show on Periscope, but it'll be on Twitch as well. So I think that'll pretty much do it, guys. Appreciate you tuning in to the Fantasy Golf Bag podcast. As always, leave us a rating and a review on iTunes. That always goes a long way. We look forward to seeing you in Slack chat if you're a premium member. And good luck this week, and we'll see you next week for the upcoming event. Good luck, guys. See ya.